Hi, welcome to Roy's Book Reviews. This video is going to be a departure from most of what you will find on this channel. If you are a regular or even an irregular visitor, then you know that the name of this BookTube channel, Roy's Book Reviews, aptly describes what you will find here. Me reviewing novels, works of nonfiction, memoirs, children's books, whatever books have come across my path that I decide to share my opinions on with you. But there are some videos here that are different in nature. I have children's books readings, for example. That's an idea I came up with during the pandemic when people were looking for ways to occupy themselves and specifically also to occupy their children while maybe they were working from home, which is something they didn't do in the past, and the kids were underfoot because they couldn't go to school. So some of the videos here are me reading children's books aloud. The camera is focused on the pages as I leaf through them. I keep my face off screen for those. As you may or may not know, I happen to be an author myself. So some of the videos here are self-promo in nature. There's a book trailer or two. There are some audio excerpts of me reading from my books, things of that nature. But for the most part, it's me reviewing books that I've read. In this video, I have decided that I am going to put on my interviewer hat and I am going to interview an author. And this is not just any author. This happens to be my favorite author of all time, who I happen to know quite well because that author is myself. As I said, I happen to be an author, as well as a father and a husband and a son and a brother and a whole bunch of things. I'm a writer, so I am going to interview myself and I am going to come up with the hardest questions that I can come up with, or the easiest, and then I am going to answer those questions to the best of my ability. So here I go. My first question for you, Roy, is do you have a writing schedule? Is there a preferred place within your home or outside of your home that you like to write at? Is there a time of day that you prefer to write during? Share your thoughts on your writing process, when and where that takes place. Thank you for having me, Roy. I am about as unscheduled as a writer can get. I wish I was one of those people who started writing at a specific time of day, worked for a particular amount of hours, turned out the rest of the world, no television, no social media, nothing interfering with my train of thought, no other humans about. But the fact of the matter is that I simply write when I write. There are times that I will write several days in a row for differing amount of times each day. There are times when weeks go by, even though I may be in the middle of working on a particular novel, a particular story, where I do not touch it. And it is not so much because life is that much busier during the times that I don't get to it, nor do I think it's a matter of inspiration. I really don't believe so much in the muse needing to visit in order to put in writing time for a day. I just am very scattered, and there are certain times when I'm like, I need to carve out some hours, or even if it's just minutes of this day. There is something I have to say. There is a piece of this book that I need to get down on paper before it slips away. And then there are, stretches of time when I am not nearly as compelled. Similar thing with where I write. I tend to do most of my writing these days at the island in my kitchen. I spend a lot of my time there in general. I also do much of my day job toiling in that spot. But I'll write on the couch sometimes or outside sitting in a lounge chair or wherever it may be that I have a pen in hand. I do write longhand, pen on paper, at least for first draft of my books. And then I move on to typing it up and doing all of the follow-up drafts on my computer. So, long story short, I do not have a scheduled place. I do not have a scheduled time. I do not have a scheduled amount of time that I put into my writing. I just get to it when I get to it. And somehow, whether it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, eventually I make it to the end. Do you believe in writer's block? And if so, is it something that you have personally experienced, and how have you overcome it? As I just touched upon, I do not necessarily wait for the muse, for inspiration to strike. Therefore, I cannot say that I truly believe in writer's block. When I go through stretches of time of inactivity, when I'm not writing, it is my choice, more or less. I am just not pushing myself to put the pedal to the metal, so to speak. And when I'm writing, I'm writing. There are no times that I can think of when I said, today I'm going to write. I'm going to write the next chapter, the next scene, the next whatever of whatever my work in progress happens to be. And nothing comes out. I just stare at the paper screen for a long time before finally giving up. That has yet to happen. Perhaps due to my erratic schedule, when I do sit down, I definitely feel that I have something to say. But I do think there are times when I sit down and I don't necessarily know what it is I want to write. I don't have particular scene in mind or anything. When that happens, I am somehow able to will myself to eventually concoct and then to start writing. So I guess I crush the block if one temporarily does appear. Therefore, I cannot say that I believe in writer's block, because writer's block to me means that no matter how hard I try, I just cannot get going. There is nothing I have to say. And where there's a will, there's a way, and I always find a way. Would you say that you are a plotter when it comes to writing books, or a pantser, meaning someone who writes by the seat of his or her pants? For the majority of the years I have been writing, I would say that I have been a plotter. My first 2 novels, Patches of Gray and Matters of Convenience, I wrote outlines where the outline was always several chapters ahead of where I was with the writing. And I tended to write chapters that were comprised of scenes. So my outline would be chapter 15, there's this scene, then there's this scene, then there's this scene. And the next chapter, the same thing, and so on and so forth. So whenever I sat down to write, I would always have at least one, usually several chapters worth of outlines written out for me, so I knew what I was going to write about. Doesn't mean that things didn't change as I went along and all of that, but I created a roadmap for myself that was at least a few miles ahead of where I happened to be driving. For my work in progress right now, I have flipped the switch and I'm kind of gone into pantser mode. There is no outline I'm working from. That's in large part due to the narrative device that I chose to employ. The main character of the story, the protagonist, is basically thinking back on his life. So the story is just a long lineup of memories from different parts of his life, but they're in no particular order. He'll think of something from a week ago, and then he'll think of something from when he was 10 years old, and then he'll think of something from a couple of hours ago, and then something from when he was college, and it jumps all over the place. It's being written in no particular order. It's meant to be read in no particular order. The final presentation may be different than how it's being written, due to the fact that since it's so arbitrary, I can, swap scenes around at will, which is not something that I was able to do with my previous books, where the outlines was following, each chapter was following up the events of what happened before it, so I couldn't really jumble things around too much. With my children's book, since it's so much shorter than an adult novel, I think I didn't write an outline, but I had this whole story in my head, more or less, and then I just wrote it straight through. It is broken down into chapters, but I didn't really need to do a chapter by chapter outline. But for the novel I'm working on, it's definitely seat in my pants. It was a decision I made at the beginning of the process. It's a little bit terrifying, a little bit liberating. Sometimes, when you are writing sequentially, and you are following a roadmap to where the story is going to go, you get stuck in certain places, and you might be, I'm not sure what I want to happen next. The way I'm writing my current novel, since it's him thinking back on what has happened in the past, I make up as I go along what it is that happened in the past that he's going to think about. So there's the answer. I am both, depending on the nature of the work. Have you ever considered writing under a pseudonym? And if so, for what reasons? I have given thought to writing under a pseudonym, under assume a character. There might be a different gender than myself, different race, different who knows what. I have yet to do it. And the only reason I've really given it thought is because every now and then an idea will occur to me that is not the type of writing I usually do. It's something that's perhaps more gadgety and just more plot oriented rather than about character development. It's something that I really think might catch on and be a bit of a hit because it's a popular trope of the moment or something like that, or has to do with something that's going on in popular culture at this moment. These ideas come, these ideas go. When they do come, I say, I could see myself maybe writing that, but I don't necessarily want to put my own name and identity on it. I don't want to author it as Roy Pickering if I do write it. So I would create a pseudonym, and seems like that would be a blast and a lot of fun to do. It has not occurred yet. I don't know if it's ever going to take place. It'd be nice if it did. It seems like it would be fun. For all I know, the books that I write under my name will not go anywhere, and then something I write as Susie McDoozy will turn out to be a worldwide bestseller. Anything's possible, as long as I keep my pen writing and put out stories that I'm proud of, whether it's the thing I most like to write or something that's a bit out of character. As long as I enjoy doing it, I would be happy to put a name of any kind on it and put it out into the world. So we shall see And maybe this entire answer is a lie, and there are already books out there written under names other than my own that you have no idea. Um, there's no way for you to know, is there? Would you say that the primary purpose of the books you write is to entertain or to say something about the state of the world? That question sort of ties into the pseudonym question you just asked, or at least my answers to those two questions tie into each other. I believe the purpose of all literature is to entertain. So technically, that is the answer. However, the writing that's nearest and dearest to my heart, when I'm reading and certainly when I'm writing, has to say something about, society, about issues that are near and dear to me, or issues that are just on my mind that are prevalent in today's society. I am never going to be someone who writes what I consider, what others may consider fluff. My stories are about things that matter to me. But be that as it may, it doesn't matter if a book is about societal issues, deep thoughts, and all of that. If the audience is not captivated, then the audience is going to stop reading. So first and foremost, you need to craft a story in which readers care what's happening, and they care about who it's happening to. They want to see how the situation is going to be resolved. They have to be, into the story, and therefore it must be entertaining. Now, entertaining doesn't necessarily mean, if you're laughing or you're crying, or, different people are entertained by different things. There are readers who love happily ever after romances. If they're reading a book about a relationship where it works out for the couple in the end, they were entertained. If the same exact story, written equally well, the author decides to have the characters, not be together, that reader is going to be less entertained because they didn't get from the book what they were looking for. My goal when I write is to write for myself, basically. There is no particular reader that I am trying to reach. There are readers who are going to appreciate the stories that I create, and there are readers who are going to be perhaps let down for one reason or another, who may have had a different expectation than where I decided to go with the story. So, but, if they found the story compelling and they were pulled along by the narrative, and, even if they wanted to go a certain way and it turned out to go another place, and so they were disappointed at the end, whether they found that to be not entertaining because they didn't like the ending or not, I still feel that I did my job, which was, I don't know if entertain is the word I would use, or just, I would say the author's job is to captivate the audience. So books need to be captivating, and I like to write books that are captivating and also have something to say. Have you ever read a book that made you think that maybe you should not be a writer because there's no way in the world you could ever write anything that good? Yes, I've read a good many books that, floored me and wowed me so much. And I realized that, I'm simply not capable of putting down a story like that, of creating something that wondrous. I've also read other books that didn't blow me away quite that much, but I just thought they were just so detailed and research material and such an exhaustive examination of a topic that I know that I just don't have the bandwidth to go that deep into a topic that requires me having to spend, hours and hours and hours in the library or online or traveling the world learning about the subject just so that I could be the world's foremost expert on it. So there are a number of books for those reasons that have left me with, I could never write something like that. But it hasn't discouraged me from writing because those authors also could never write the stories that I wrote or will be writing. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about storytelling is that each story is unique to the teller, and we, all of us artists, all of us writers, have our own unique spin to put on a tale. Even if 10 different writers are writing stories that have very similar elements to each other, it doesn't mean that you have 10 versions of the same book. You can have 10 very different books. So even though I, love to read and I read as fast and as voluminously as I can, and I think I have pretty good taste in reading. So I read some incredible novels and books that there's no way in the world that I ever could have put something like that into the world. But that's okay. It wasn't my job to create those books. It's my job to create my books. What comes first for you in the writing process? The plot or the characters? It often feels like a simultaneous thing, but to give a definitive answer one way or the other, I am going to say the plot comes first, at least it does for me, because regardless of who the characters may be that I end up creating, they exist because I came up with the story that I wanted to tell. And then I come up with the people that I want these events to happen to, and I want to experience these things, and I want to go through these changes and reach these epiphanies and all of that jazz. If I wrote a book and had a certain, group of characters in it, and then I decided later, you know what, I want to tell that same story, but I want to make 2 or 3 of these characters completely different. I'm going to change their name. I'm going to change their descriptions. I'm going to change their personalities. But I want the story to be the same. I could do that. That would be possible because the story was the main thing, and then the characters are secondary to it. I just made the plot elements happen to a different group of people. If I came up with the people first, they could be in a variety of different stories, and each one of them would be completely different because, the different plots and different things are happening. It just happens to be the same people. I guess that's what sequels are. I mean, series are, or stories where you have a particular character or a group of characters and they just have one adventure after another, and each adventure is different from the ones before and after. What's the same are the people that it's happening to. That's what I am trying to do with a children's book series that I'm writing now, the absolutely amazing adventures of Ava Applesauce. One of them is out, one of them is written and waiting for the illustrations, so put that one out in the world next. But when it comes to the novels that I write, it is the story, it is the scenario that I come up with. And then I say, okay, so who do I want to be? in this scenario. And those two things happen very close in time to each other. So it seems like it's happening all at once, but not quite. One happens nanoseconds before the other. What impact has social media had on your writing? I'm quite hooked on social media, so I'd have to say that it has definitely impacted me. A big part of the impact, as many authors, many artists will tell you, is simply the time suck. It can be quite addictive, particularly for me anyway, Twitter, or X, but I refuse to call it X, so stick with Twitter. Um, that is the site that I spend a good amount of time on each day. And could some of that time be spent writing instead? Most definitely. And I've noticed that there are several writers who I followed on Twitter will go through periods where they are, tweeting up a storm and having all sorts of conversations. And then one day they'll be, whether they make an announcement or not, they will simply vanish for several months, and okay, that's when they're working on the next book, and they don't want the distraction. Perhaps I'll do something like that in the future. I haven't done it yet. The thing is, the book that I'm writing right now doesn't have a title yet. It is very much influenced by events of the day that I came to learn about, or even if that's not how I learned about it, it's how I saw different perspectives from many people and links to various articles and feuds about it, and people going back and forth about these topics on social media. And sometimes I enter these conversations, sometimes I just sit back and observe. I tend to jump into a lot of them. So the story that I'm writing now, it's, there are elements, straight from the presses and straight from the tweets, the streets, to do with police brutality and gun rights and psychological issues that affect whether someone becomes a shooter or not, and what's the chicken and what's the egg, and is the problem that the guns exist, or is it the problem that there are people out there who use them in the wrong way? Things of that matter that, due to one event or another, a lot of people, will be talking about it for, stretches of time online, on social media. And because I am a very active participant, I formed strong opinions or gave a lot of thought to these issues, more so than if I was staying offline or staying off of social media. So this book that I'm writing now is very much in response to the fact that I've spent all of this time on social media, and that is what gave me the ideas. That is what the impetus was to create this particular story. And had I not been on it, I don't know what I would be writing. I would be writing something, because I wrote books and stories before social media came along. And if it goes away, or at least if Twitter goes away, I will continue to write, no doubt. But I'm not going to bash it and say it's been, completely a time suck and completely, waste of my energy. I use it to create, and that's what writers do. Whether it's sitting in a cafe and looking at the people walking about, or it's reading other books, or watching movies, or going on social media site and seeing what people are talking about. A lot of it just kind of just comes and goes, and then all of a sudden there's something that's a spark, and that spark sets the next story going. So I have definitely been impacted in ways both positive and negative, but I'm going to say mostly positive by social media. And of course, it's a place to promote myself. And since I'm not published by a major publishing house, and I don't have a whole marketing team and budget and all of that behind me, social media is where I go to let people know that I'm out here, my books are out here, and encouraging them to check it out. So I won't be vanishing from it anytime soon because, I need it. What are some comparison books that you feel are similar to those you have written? Do you set out to write a book inspired by books that you have read? I can't say that I really look to books that I've read in the past as inspiration for what I write. I answered earlier that there are books I've read that have made me wonder if I should pick up the pen to try to write because there's no way, I'm capable of, putting such beauty out into the world on such incredibly orchestrated stories. But in terms of there is a plot, there is a set of circumstances that I would like to tell a story about. I don't get that from anything that I have read. When I sit down to write something, it is because I feel I have a story that has not already been told. There will be elements of it, of course, that you can find in other works, but the overall story is something I feel has never been composed, and that's why I'm writing it. I'm not trying to duplicate anyone. I'm not trying to put my own personal spin on a tale as old as time. I'm not creating my version of anything. I am trying to leave behind a body of work that doesn't remind you of anything but itself. That sounds a bit arrogant, but that is the case. I will say that there have been plenty of times when I will read a book, and particularly a lot of times when I'm writing a review of a book I've read, and thinking about the various plot points and elements of the story, and it'll just dawn on me, hey, that's kind of reminds me of something that I wrote about in this, and that reminds me a little bit of something I touched upon in that. And it always tends to be something that I read after I've already written and published my story, and then I'll read something else that will remind me. But usually it's just like a fraction. It's just like a particular plot point that remind me of an element of my story. But the overall stories that I tell, that I've told to date, that I'm currently working on, and that I will tell in the future, they are each their own thing. If I thought that I wasn't creating something that didn't exist, I might not bother to do it in the first place. I would just point you towards the thing that already existed, and I would say, hey, go read that. It's pretty good. Stories I write need to be written, I feel, because they're not there. And the only way for them to be in the world is for me to put them there. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I will continue to do for as long as, God willing, I am here to do it. Do you do a lot of research for your books, or is write what you know the strategy that you typically employ? I am predominantly a write what you know type author. Each of the adult novels that I've written, and most of the, or I don't know about most, but many of the short stories that I have written have been based on, things that happened, in the world that I am familiar with, love and loss and all that jazz. I'm not writing stories that are set on distant planets, and I am not writing about real life events, in which I want it to be as true to what really occurred as possible. I am making things up, but I am making things up that are based on ordinary people living ordinary lives. One of my favorite books of all time, also a wonderful movie, is Ordinary People, is the name of it. It's also the name of a song by John Legend I'm not so crazy about. But Ordinary People is the overall theme of my writing career, for the most part. An exception would be children's book series that I am writing, because that's a fantasy world type story. It's about a little girl who ends up being sent into, I guess, sort of an alternate dimension. And when she goes into this other world, she's a different person. It's like a princess in that world. And she has to deal with all sorts of things there that she does not have to deal with in her real life. And then, eventually she gets sent back. So there's like not two versions of her. It's the same little girl, but in two places, dealing with two very different sets of circumstances. But for my novels and most of my short stories, they take place usually in one place, and planet Earth. Usually, contemporary. I'm not writing historical fiction. I'm not writing speculative fiction, set in the future or anything like that. So therefore, I don't really need to do a tremendous amount of research in that. I'm just writing, about emotions, about feelings. I will have to research little things here and there. I'll decide this character has this job and I don't have that job, and I don't have anyone to interview about that. So I will look up and just find as many details. Or there are, various elements of a storyline, particularly in the book I'm writing now, which I need to be, a bit more of an expert on. And, Google is definitely writer's friend. But no, I am not a big research guy. I guess I'm just lazy. I do love reading historical fiction. I love reading nonfiction. I love reading about people who are living very different types of lives than the one that I'm living, and people that I deal with are living. But when I write, I just want to write about people today, ordinary people doing ordinary things, maybe sometimes a little bit extraordinary. So I'm a write what you know guy, and so far so good. You have written and published two novels, a children's book, a novella, and quite a few, I would say at least 50 or so short stories to date. My final question for you is, what's next? But right now I am working on a novel. I touched upon it a little bit in previous answers. It is about a white male police officer in New York City who kills a young black man in the line of duty. And the story is basically, how this impacts his life going forward. I'm not going to give very many spoilers in this answer. I will give teases about the plot, in the upcoming months. But just for now, that's about all I have to say about it. It's told from this cop's point of view. And as I said, another answer, he is reflecting back on his life. So the story takes place, well after the shooting, and he's thinking back on the time of the shooting, but also in the years well before it, and also in the years that followed. And that's all I'm going to say about it for now. It doesn't have a title yet, so I hope you read it once it's done and ready, printed and bound, and all that jazz. And when that will be, I have no idea yet. Also, I've written two books in the children's book series, The Absolutely Amazing Adventures of Ava Applesauce. The first one's already published, and you can buy it on Amazon. Second one's written and is waiting for the illustrator, who is my wife, to complete the illustration. So I'm hoping 2024, hopefully in the first half of the year, it will be done and ready to hit the presses. And it's been a while since I've written any short stories. I kind of have a resolution going to get back on that wagon. So hopefully I'll have some new short stories coming your way in the not too distant future. And I think that about covers it for now, my writing goals and plans. I'm going to have to start thinking about novel number 4 pretty soon, because I am kind of getting into the wrapping up section of number 3, at least wrapping up the first draft. I know it's going to, there's going to be multiple drafts to come after, so still quite a ways to go before I really have to take a deep dive into novel number 4, but sooner than that time will be here. That's why I like having multiple projects, so I can, whenever I'm stuck in one, I can, jump over to another where the thoughts are moving a bit more fluidly. So I need to write third installment of Ava Applesauce, and I need to eventually get to a 4th novel, and I need to get to short story number whatever it is I'm up to, and who knows what else will pop into my head to create maybe more nonsense like this.